In December 1941, Adolf Hitler made a decision that most historians consider one of the greatest strategic blunders in modern history. 4 days after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Germany voluntarily declared war on the United States. Nobody forced him. There was no treaty obligation that required it. He chose to do it. And when you understand why he made that choice and what he truly believed about America, the entire story of how Germany lost the war becomes much clearer. Because Germany did not simply underestimate American military strength. Germany misunderstood what America actually was. And that misunderstanding came not from ignorance, but from something far more dangerous: certainty. To understand this, you have to go back to how German leadership viewed the world in the late 1930s. Hitler and his inner circle had a very specific picture of the United States. They saw it as a racially divided, politically weak, and militarily soft country. A country of immigrants with no unified culture, no serious fighting tradition, and no real will to go to war. They believed American democracy was too slow and too fragile to mobilize effectively. They believed American industry, while large, could not be converted quickly enough to matter. And they believed the American public had no appetite for a European war. Some of these observations were not entirely wrong at the time. In 1940, the United States military ranked 17th in the world, 17th behind Romania. The army was small, equipment was outdated. Soldiers trained with wooden rifles and trucks with the word tank painted on the side because there were not enough actual tanks. If you were looking at raw numbers in 1940, you might understand why someone could dismiss American military power. But Hitler was not just reading numbers. He was reading America through a deeply flawed lens. He genuinely believed that a multi-ethnic democracy could not function under pressure. He had written about this. He had said it publicly. He was not pretending. He actually believed that internal division would fracture America before it could become a serious threat. This belief shaped everything that followed. There were people inside Germany who knew better. German ambassador to the United States, Hans Diekhoff, warned Berlin repeatedly throughout the late 1930s. He described American industrial capacity in clear terms. He explained that the political mood was shifting. He said that if the United States entered the war, Germany would face a force it was not prepared to manage. His reports were noted. Some were read, and then, essentially, they were set aside. Not because Hitler did not receive the information, but because the information did not fit the conclusion he had already reached. This is one of the quieter tragedies of the German leadership in this period. The intelligence apparatus often functioned. Warnings were issued, concerns were raised, but the decision-making structure at the top had a way of filtering out information that contradicted the existing worldview. When one man's instinct is treated as superior to evidence, warnings become noise. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Hitler's reaction was almost enthusiastic. He saw it as a relief. He believed Japan's entry into the Pacific would permanently distract America, tie down the American Navy, and buy Germany the time it needed to finish the war in Europe. He declared war on the United States 4 days later in a speech filled with contempt for Roosevelt and dismissiveness toward American power. He seemed almost energized by it. What he failed to calculate was what American anger actually produces. Before Pearl Harbor, America was divided. A significant portion of the population wanted no part of the war in Europe or Asia. The America First movement was large and vocal. Roosevelt was navigating carefully, helping Britain through Lend-Lease but unable to push the country into open conflict. American public opinion was a real constraint. Hitler knew this, and he used it as evidence that America was weak. He never understood that this division would collapse in a single moment. After Pearl Harbor, the United States did not slowly warm up to the idea of war. The country unified almost overnight. Recruitment offices were flooded. Factories began retooling. Political opposition to the war largely evaporated. The same democratic system that Hitler believed was too fractured to act cohesively demonstrated something he had not accounted for, that under genuine threat, democratic societies can move with remarkable speed and purpose. And then came the production numbers. In 1941, the United States produced around 4,000 aircraft. By 1944, that number was nearly 100,000 in a single year. American shipyards that once took a year to build a cargo vessel reduced that time to an average of 42 days. By the end of the war, the United States had produced more steel, more aluminum, more aircraft, more ships, and more ammunition than Germany, Japan, and Italy combined. The industrial capacity that Hitler had vaguely acknowledged but emotionally dismissed became the defining material fact of the entire war. German war planners understood some of this, at least partially. Albert Speer, who ran German armaments production, later wrote with striking honesty about the moment he began to realize that Germany was in a production war it could not win. German industry was not set up for total war in the same way. Hitler had initially believed the war would be short. He did not push Germany into full wartime industrial mobilization early enough because he assumed the conflict would be over before it became necessary. By the time full mobilization happened, America was already accelerating at a pace Germany could not match. This was not just a material failure. It was a failure of imagination. Hitler's entire strategic worldview was built around speed, quick campaigns, decisive victories, collapsing enemies before they could stabilize. It had worked against Poland. It had worked against France. He applied the same thinking to a conflict with America without recognizing that America operated on a completely different timeline and scale. What worked against a nation that could be overrun in weeks meant nothing against a nation separated by an ocean with an industrial base that no bombing campaign could reach. There is also the psychological dimension that often gets overlooked. Hitler's contempt for America was personal and almost cultural in nature. He looked at American consumer culture, at Hollywood, at what he perceived as a shallow and commercially obsessed society, and concluded that such a people could not produce serious soldiers or serious sacrifice. This was a catastrophic misreading. The same society that produced consumer culture also produced men who fought at Guadalcanal, at Normandy, at the Battle of the Bulge, and kept fighting. General Friedrich von Paulus, surrounded at Stalingrad in early 1943, reportedly remarked that Germany was now at war with the entire world and had no realistic path to victory. He was right, and the entry of America had a great deal to do with why. The two-front pressure was not just physical, it was psychological. German commanders on the Eastern Front knew that even if they stabilized their position against the Soviets, there was a growing Allied force building in the West that would eventually come. Resources had to be split, attention had to be divided, and the knowledge that time was working against you changes how armies think and how leaders decide. The decision to declare war on America also had a direct effect on the Battle of the Atlantic. German submarines had been highly effective against British shipping, but once America entered the war, the resources dedicated to defeating the U-boat threat increased dramatically. American shipbuilding was replacing losses faster than submarines could create them. By mid-1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had fundamentally shifted. Germany was losing submarines faster than it could replace them. The strategy that had been slowly strangling Britain was now becoming a slow-motion defeat. At every level, naval, industrial, strategic, and psychological, the entry of the United States changed the nature of the war in ways Germany had no real answer to. What is worth sitting with is not just that Germany made a mistake, but why a leadership capable of extraordinary planning in other areas made such a fundamental error in this one. Part of it was ideological. The Nazi worldview literally could not accommodate the idea that a democratic, multiracial society could outperform a racially organized state. The ideology demanded that conclusion before the evidence was even examined. When your beliefs tell you something is impossible, you stop seriously preparing for it. Part of it was also the success that had come before. The rapid defeat of France in 1940 had created a kind of institutional overconfidence inside the German military and political leadership. When things go well for long enough, the idea that they could go fundamentally wrong begins to feel abstract. Caution gets interpreted as weakness, warning gets treated as defeatism. The generals who raised concerns found themselves sidelined. The ones who agreed with Hitler found themselves promoted. This is how overconfidence becomes structural. It rewards itself. And part of it was simply Hitler himself. He was not a cautious man. He was a man who had gambled repeatedly and won, who had been told repeatedly that his instincts were wrong and had then watched those instincts prove right. That kind of track record is dangerous. It makes a person stop listening. By 1941, Hitler had reached a point where his own judgment had become, in his own mind, more reliable than any intelligence report, any general's warning, or any ambassador's assessment. Declaring war on the United States was the purest expression of that mindset. It was a decision made not from strategic calculation, but from something closer to contempt. He did not declare war because he had a plan to defeat America. He declared war because he did not believe America required a plan. He thought history had already decided in Germany's favor. History had not. The United States mobilized, produced, trained, and fought at a scale that transformed the entire trajectory of the war. Germany never found an answer to it, not militarily, not industrially, not psychologically. The war Germany thought it would win quickly turned into exactly the kind of long, grinding conflict of attrition that Germany could not sustain. The lesson is not really about tanks or planes or production numbers, though all of those matter. The lesson is about what happens when a leadership becomes so certain of its own conclusions that it stops honestly evaluating what it is up against. Germany did not lose the war only on the battlefield. It lost the war in the mindset of its leaders. In the moment, they decided that a country of 130 million people with the largest industrial economy on earth was not worth taking seriously. That decision had a cost, and the cost was everything.